Okay, so last class we have completed the various classification of inflation. Inflation has been classified on the basis of causes of inflation, then rate of inflation, and then on the basis of inclusion and exclusion of commodities. So we have different kind of inflation like demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, then mild inflation, galloping inflation, hyperinflation, and then core inflation and headline inflation. All these inflation have been discussed in the last class. Today, first of all, we'll discuss price index in India, because inflation is calculated in the economy on the basis of price index. So the first topic is price index in India. We'll see various kinds of price indices which is used for the sake of calculation of inflation, and then we'll discuss methods of controlling inflation, and at last we'll be discussing two important topics. One is Phillips curve and second one is stagflation, right? So the first one is price index in India. Price index in India. Inflation prevailing in the economy is based on price index. First, we need to construct price index and then we calculate the inflation in the economy. And it's everywhere, not only in India, it's everywhere. First, you have to construct price index, and on the basis of those price indices, you have to calculate the inflation in the economy. So first we'll see the meaning of price index, and then we'll discuss different kinds of price indices that are constructed in our economy for the sake of calculation of inflation, right? Basically, we have two kinds of price index that we'll discuss in this particular topic. The first one is wholesale price index and second one is consumer price index. So inflation in our country is based on these two kinds of price indices: wholesale price index and consumer price index, right? So we have two inflation. One is based on WPI, this is called WPI inflation, and second one is based on CPI, which is called CPI based inflation. We'll discuss them in detail one by one. But before that, we'll see the meaning of price index. What we mean by price index. So price index is nothing but statistical measure. It's a statistical measure. It's a statistical measure, right? You have some statistical measure like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, है ना? ये सब पढ़े हैं आप लोग, है ना? In your statistics book, there are some statistical measure that we just learn how to compute them, है ना? These are averages, mean, median, mode, है ना? आप लोग पढ़े हैं? ये एवरेज है, दिस इज एवरेज, या फिर परसेंटाइल, क्वार्टाइल, स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन, कोरिलेशन, रिग्रेशन, लाइन ऑफ बेस्ट फिट, लाइन ऑफ क्वालिटी, है ना, P2, T स्क्वायर. These are various statistical measure, है ना? Likewise, price index is also a statistical measure. And how this is constructed? When we construct a price index, what we do, we take into consideration the prices of various goods and services and we start recording them, है ना? Let's suppose we are constructing a price index. So in this price index, what we do, we record the prices of various goods and services from a particular point of time. Let's suppose we are recording the price from 2012, right? So there could be a multiple of commodities, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, right? Multiple of them whose prices are being recorded every year. Okay, what were the prices of the first commodity in 2012, in 2013, in 2014? So you have a very comprehensive table that gives you an idea whether price has increased or decreased over the past years, right? And this particular table is referred to as price index. So price index is nothing but a statistical measure in which we record the prices of goods and services, है ना, for a period of time, right? So this is how you define the price index. Please write it down. It's a statistical measure. Price index is a statistical measure that records that records prices of various goods and services, that records prices of various goods and services over a period of time, prices of various goods and services over a period of time. ठीक है? So you have some articles, you have some commodities, and their prices are being recorded in a particular manner. This is what we mean by price index. And now using this price index, we can find out the rate of inflation in the economy, right? We'll see what is happening to the average price over the last 1 year. And if we find that average price or prices of those goods and services are on the increase over the last 1 year, we'll say that there is inflation in the economy, and we can find out the rate of inflation using the formula that I discussed in the last class, right? So basically in our country there are two price indices that are being constructed. One is called WPI and second one is called CPI. The basic difference is that here in the construction of wholesale price index, we take into consideration the prices of those goods and services which are traded in wholesale market. In the construction of WPI, we take into consideration the prices of only those commodities which are bought and sold in wholesale market, not in retail market, right? So this is wholesale price index. And when we construct the CPI, consumer price index, or this is also called RPI, retail price index. This is wholesale price index and this is retail price index. So in the construction of retail price index, prices of only those goods and services are being recorded. Prices of only those goods and services are recorded that are being traded in retail market, not in wholesale market. You got the idea? है ना? लिखिए WPI. WPI wholesale price index. It's an index in which only those goods and services, it's an index in which only the prices of those goods and services are recorded. Only the prices of those goods and services are recorded which are bought and sold in wholesale market. Bought and sold in wholesale market. ठीक है? On the other hand, CPI consists of prices of those goods and services which are traded in retail markets. So this is the basic difference between WPI and CPI, and based on them we'll have two different kinds of inflation. One is WPI based inflation, that gives the inflation of wholesale market. WPI based inflation gives the inflation of wholesale market, and another inflation that is based on CPI, and this particular inflation gives the inflation of retail market, है ना? So we have two different kinds of inflation. One inflation is about the inflation of wholesale market, and through that inflation we find out what percentage price has increased in the wholesale market, whether wholesale market has become expensive or less expensive over the last 1 year, right? Like today you must be knowing that WPI based inflation in our country is close to 15%, है ना? Today in our country WPI based inflation is close to how much? 15%. This is the inflation of wholesale market, है ना? This is the inflation of wholesale market. That means in wholesale market, on an average, goods and services have become expensive by 15% past 1 year, है ना? Price of the articles that are traded in wholesale market has become expensive on an average by 15% over the last 1 year. That is not necessary. Sometimes the WPI inflation translate into CPI inflation, but sometimes it doesn't. Why there is disconnect between these two, I will explain to you later on, है ना? But here my point is that in our country there are two kinds of inflation. One is based on WPI, and that gives us the inflation of wholesale market, and through this inflation we come to know what percentage price has increased or decreased over the last 1 year on an average, है ना? So if WPI based inflation is 15%, that means on an average prices of all these articles that are traded in wholesale market has increased by 15% over the last 1 year. So things have become expensive, more expensive. They have become expensive by 15% over the last 1 year. Another inflation is based on retail price, है ना? It is based on retail price that gives us the inflation of retail market, है ना? कि what is the percentage of inflation in the retail market. So you must be knowing that today CPI based inflation is 7%, right? Our CPI based inflation is close to 7%. This is the rate of inflation prevailing in the retail market. We are impacted more by CPI based inflation than by WPI based inflation, because we basically make purchase in the retail market, not in the wholesale market, and that's the reasons we are impacted more by CPI based inflation than by WPI based inflation. But which segment of society is impacted by WPI based inflation? You will find that in WPI or the WPI based inflation impacts our business classes, right? It impacts our business classes because business classes make purchase of things from the wholesale market and then later on they sell them in the retail market, right? So business class will be impacted directly from the WPI based inflation, and we consumers will get impacted directly from the CPI based inflation. Is that clear? So now we'll see how this WPI is constructed in our country, what is the method, what is the procedure, and on the basis of WPI based inflation how the rate of inflation is calculated. We are going to learn about the WPI and CPI in detail now, है ना? So first one is WPI, wholesale price index. Please write it down, WPI. So in our country, in the construction of WPI, we take into consideration the prices of 697 commodities. Right? 697 commodities prices are being considered in the construction of wholesale price index. है ना? मैंने आपको क्या बताया था कि in the construction of price index what we have to do is to take into consideration the prices of some goods and services, है ना? So here in the construction of wholesale price index, how many goods and services price are being considered? 697 commodities prices are being considered, and these commodities are bought and sold in where? Wholesale market. It's not bought and sold in retail market, है ना? They are traded in where? In wholesale market, right? We just record their prices 1 2 3 4 697 commodities, है ना? Prices of each one of them is being recorded every year, है ना, कि what were their prices in the month of January 2012, then in the month of February 2012. Every month, every year, we keep on recording their prices so that we have a very comprehensive table of prices of all these articles which are traded in wholesale market, right? And that table will give you a rough idea as to what is happening to the price, whether price is on the increase or price is on decline, right? But if you want to find out the exact rate of inflation, you'll have to find out the average price and compare the average price with that of last year. So WPI based inflation will be the inflation of these 697 commodities on an average basis, right? So if we are interested to find out inflation in the month of April 2022, let's suppose, so what we do, we find out the average price of these 697 commodities and compare the average price that used to prevail last year in April 2021, है ना? So let's suppose average price of 697 commodities last year was 100 rupees and this year is 105 rupees. So average price in the wholesale market has increased. Average price of these 697 commodities has increased over the last 1 year. So we have inflation. And now we can find out the rate of inflation using the formula that I discussed in the last class. This is P1, this is P0. So P1 minus P0 upon P0 multiplied with 100, right? So using this formula, we can find out the rate of inflation in the economy, right? So first we construct the price index, and in the construction of price index, what we have to do is to record the prices of each and every article sold in the wholesale market every month and every year, so that we have a big picture of, trend of prices, whether prices are increasing or prices are on the decline. But if we want to know the exact rate of inflation, we'll have to use this formula. We'll find out the average price of 697 commodities and then compare, so that we can find out the rate of inflation or deflation prevailing in the economy. Right now, WPI based inflation is 15%. What does that mean? That means the average price of these 697 commodities has increased by 15% over the last 1 year. है ना? Their average price has increased by 15% over the last 1 year. This is the first point. आया समझ में आप लोगों को? आप लोग समझ पा रहे हैं? मंजोत, नकुल? हाँ, क्या? लास्ट 5 years? क्या क्या बोल रहे, मैं सुन नहीं पाया. अच्छा, कब से करे वो मैं आपको बताऊंगा, है ना? कब से करे वो मैं आपको बताऊंगा. ठीक है, इतना तो क्लियर है ना? हम लोग इसको रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हैं, कब से कर रहे हैं हम वो डिस्कस करेंगे. तो इसमें आपने देखा कि 697 कमोडिटीज़ है, एंड ये कमोडिटीज़ जो है 3 तरह के हैं. इसमें देयर आर 3 काइंड्स ऑफ कमोडिटीज़. इसमें इन सब की बिक्री जो है होलसेल मार्केट में होती है. इसमें 3 तरह के कमोडिटी हैं. पहला जो है ये है प्राइमरी आर्टिकल्स. देयर आर सम प्राइमरी आर्टिकल्स. there are some primary articles, there are some and fuel, and then there are manufacturing goods. Right? ठीक है? Primary articles, power and fuel, and manufacturing goods. The highest number is that of manufacturing goods, 600. I think ये आपका है 16 in numbers. This is 117. This is 117 in numbers, and this is 564. है ना? इसको ऐड करके देखो तो हो रहा क्या? 697 आ रहा क्या? आ रहा ना? नहीं आ रहा? हाँ, तो ये नंबर्स को आपको याद रखना है कि द मैक्सिमम नंबर इज दैट ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग आर्टिकल्स एंड द लिस्ट नंबर इज दैट ऑफ पावर एंड फ्यूल, है ना? सो नाउ व्हाट यू मीन बाय प्राइमरी आर्टिकल्स? व्हाट यू मीन बाय प्राइमरी आर्टिकल्स? Do you have any idea what we mean by primary articles? Which products? Agricultural. So agricultural product is one of the primary articles. But we may have, you know, other primary articles as well. So how you define? Primary articles are those articles that we procure, that we obtain using natural resources, है ना? Or something that we acquire from nature is called primary articles. Like all the agricultural output, since they are being procured using natural resources, so agriculture output is primary article, है ना? Even minerals that we use, है ना? Minerals are obtained or extracted from the earth or soil, है ना? So minerals are also the primary articles since they are obtained from nature. So anything that we obtain from nature is called primary articles. So in these primary articles we have some food grains, we have some commercial crops, agricultural commercial crops, and we have some minerals, है ना? Like coal, nickel, all these things, है ना? They are minerals, they are being procured from the nature. And in the category of power and fuel, that's quite clear, है ना? Manufacturing goods are those goods which are being produced in plant or factories, है ना? Using the raw materials, when we produce something in plant or factories, they are called manufacturing items, right? So we have three kinds of goods in the category of WPI baskets, right? The prices are recorded every month, every year, and on the basis of that we find out the rate of inflation in wholesale market. ठीक है? इसका बेस ईयर जो है, बेस ईयर ऑफ WPI, बेस ईयर ऑफ WPI इज 2011-12 है ना? So in this new series of WPI we have been recording the price from this year onwards, right? अभी आप क्वेश्चंस पूछ रहे थे ना कि सर हम लोग कब से प्राइस को रिकॉर्ड करते आ रहे हैं इस WPI सीरीज के लिए, है ना? सो वी आर रिकॉर्डिंग दैम फ्रॉम 2011-12, है ना? This is our new series of WPI that came into force in 2017 only, right? So every 5 years of time we revise our WPI, and in the revision of WPI what you find that some new articles are being included and some erstwhile articles are being excluded, right? Basically our WPI basket must represent our needs or requirement. So what happens, as time began to pass, some articles becomes out of use, we stop using them, they become out of use, they become out of vogue, right? So those articles should not be included in the calculation of inflation, right? And some articles come into force, we start using them and their prices must be included in the calculation of inflation, right? So our consumptions has to be represented by our wholesale price index or CPI index, and that must contain our behavior of consumptions, which articles we are using and which articles we have stopped using. So articles we have stopped using must be excluded and the new articles that we have started using must be included, and that is why we need to make a revision of WPI and CPI every 5 years of time so that they represent our needs and behavior. आ रहा समझ में? So this is the 7th series of WPI. It came into force in 2017 and this year onwards we'll have the new series that is yet to publish, that is yet to publish. But every time we bring in new series of WPI, some components are being changed by the government, like base year will be changed, and today the base year is 2021. In the new series you will find that base year will be increased to 2017-18. This would be the new base year, right? And the number of commodities may also change. It may decrease or increase. Some articles will be excluded, some new articles will be included, right? Like in the previous series of WPI, in the 6th series of WPI, the number of commodities was only 676. When the 7th was introduced, you can see that number of commodities was increased from 676 to 697. So this happened. Even the base year was improved. The base year in the 6th series of WPI was only 2004 and 5. Now you can see that base year has been increased to 2011 and 12, right? So when this WPI was being used, we were recording the prices from 2004 and 5, right? But now today we have the new series of WPI, and in this new series of WPI we are recording the prices of all these articles from 2011 and 12, right? Then in the new series we will start recording them from 2017 and 18, right? So this happens every 5 years of time. In the coming months or 2 you will see that we'll have the new series of WPI. आ गया समझ में? Are you getting my point? So one more thing is that most of the things that you find in the WPI basket, all these 697 commodities, they are raw materials and intermediate goods. They are not the final goods. All these 697 commodities are either raw material or intermediate goods. Intermediate goods. They are not the final product that we use in order to fulfill our needs. I will explain that just a while. Now the first thing that we have to keep in our mind is that all these articles are raw materials and intermediate goods. Not a single commodity that have been recorded as the item of WPI is final product. They all are raw material and intermediate goods. So we consumers do not make purchase of raw material and intermediate goods. We purchase final product to fulfill our needs. But business classes, they require raw material, they require intermediate goods. So obviously they make purchase of these articles from the wholesale market. So if there is inflation in this wholesale market, that impacts business classes or the producers more than the consumers. Is that clear? So WPI based inflation is the proxy of input price. It is not the proxy of output price. Are you getting my point? It is the proxy of input price. It is the proxy of prices of raw material. So if WPI based inflation is 15%, that means raw material in our country has become expensive by 15% over the last 1 year. All these things are raw material. They are not the final product. So if WPI based inflation is 15%, whose prices have increased? Prices of raw material and intermediate goods on an average has increased by 15%. So raw material in our country has become expensive by 15%, and that's going to impact the business classes or the producers who purchase all these raw materials in order to produce goods and services, final goods and services for consumers. We are not going to impacted in a direct manner. Business class or producers will get impacted in a direct manner. It is the proxy of input price. समझ रहे हो आप लोग या नहीं आ रहा समझ में? हाँ जी मैडम, बोलिए बोलिए, नहीं समझ में आ रहा तो पूछिए. वो तो मैं which goods? Manufacturing goods could be raw material. Like look at this one. I mean, yeah, this one. Or look at this one. This is manufacturing item but not the final product. है ना. And the components of, the components of, let's suppose, car, है ना, components, various components of car that are being assembled, है ना, they are manufacturing goods, है ना. wheels हो गया manufacturing goods हो गया, steering हो गया manufacturing goods हो गया. They all are produced in the factory, so they are manufacturing goods. But are they final goods? No, they have to be, assembled, they have to be put together to create a final product. Which one? No, that's not included in WPI. है ना, that's our retail purchase. That's our retail purchase that we make in the wholesale market. है ना. So that's not included in this WPI, wholesale price index. है ना. In this wholesale price index, we have only these 697 commodities, and all of them are either raw material or intermediate goods. है ना. ये आपके फाइनल प्रोडक्ट नहीं है, रॉ मटेरियल है, ये इंटरमीडिएट गुड्स है. ठीक है. सो WPI इन्फ्लेशन जो है आपको ये बताता है कि रॉ मटेरियल कितनी महंगी हुई है, उसका कितना इन्फ्लेशन है. आगे समझ में आप लोग को. So you come to know about the WPI based inflation through newspapers. Every month you are informed of WPI based inflation. Like for the month of March 2022, है ना, March 2022 inflation rate is 15%. Now that means as compared to March 2021, the average price of these 697 commodities has increased by 15%. So we can say that raw materials in our country has got expensive by 15% past 1 year. है ना. आगे समझ में आप लोग को. So which ministry and which department is responsible for construction of WPI and publication of inflation based on WPI? This question can be asked, है ना. So there is a ministry which is called Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Ministry of Commerce and Industries publishes WPI based inflation every month, है ना. Publishes WPI based inflation every month. Please write it down. Ministry of Commerce and Industries. Ministry of Commerce and Industries publishes WPI based inflation every month. But sometimes you may be asked, which department of this ministry? A ministry consists of various departments. So sometimes the questions can be, which department of this particular ministry is responsible for publication of WPI based inflation. So there is a department, this is called Department for Promotion of Industries and Internal Trade. Promotion of Industries and Internal Trade. ठीक है. So this particular department of Ministry of Commerce and Industries is responsible for publication of WPI on monthly basis. Got it? This is published or released by Ministry of Commerce and Industries. ठीक है. So till the time we had the new framework of monetary policy which we call inflation targeting, this WPI based inflation used to be considered as the official anchor of inflation in our country, है ना. We started the new framework of monetary policy in 2016, we know that, right? Before that, that means till 2015, the official anchor of inflation for India was WPI based inflation. है ना. WPI based inflation was our official inflation. Officially we used to represent our inflation using WPI based inflation, है ना. And we did so till we adopted the new framework of monetary policy in 2016. And after that, now we have abandoned the use of WPI based inflation as the official anchor of inflation, and instead we are using CPI based inflation as official indicator of inflation, है ना. तो अब इंडिया का ऑफिशियल इन्फ्लेशन किसको माना जा रहा, सीपीआई बेस्ड इन्फ्लेशन को माना जा रहा है ना. 2016 से पहले वी यूज्ड टू कंसीडर डब्ल्यूपीआई बेस्ड इन्फ्लेशन एज आवर ऑफिशियल इन्फ्लेशन, है ना. तो ऑफिशियली जो है, आधिकारिक रूप से जो है, हम इन्फ्लेशन किसको मानेंगे, है ना. वी हैव टू काइंड्स ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन. वन इज द इन्फ्लेशन about the wholesale market, second is inflation about the retail market, but which one is going to represent our inflation? So till 2015 WPI based inflation was our official inflation, right. So central government and the Reserve Bank of India used to take all the decisions on the basis of WPI based inflation, but now we have abandoned WPI based inflation as our official anchor of inflation. On the basis of advice of the same committee, Urjit Patel committee, now CPI based inflation has been adopted as our official anchor of inflation, है ना. So officially CPI based inflation is the inflation that even Reserve Bank of India is targeting. We have seen that RBI under its new framework of monetary policy needs to contain inflation between 2 to 6%, है ना. RBI has to ensure that inflation is between 2 and 6%. But what inflation RBI is going to target now? Since our official anchor of inflation is CPI based, so Reserve Bank of India targets CPI based inflation. But before 2016, when inflation was officially WPI based, so we used to take all the decisions on the basis of WPI based inflation. But now we are targeting the CPI based inflation, right? So there must be some drawbacks with WPI based inflation, and that is why Urjit Patel committee advised the government that instead of using WPI based inflation as our official anchor of inflation, we must be using the CPI based inflation. So we must be knowing what are the drawbacks of WPI based inflation, right. We have not stopped publishing WPI based inflation, है ना. That is still relevant for the producers, for the business classes. We have to know how exactly and how much prices of raw material increases every month, every year, and for that reasons we keep on calculating the WPI based inflation. What we have left is the use of WPI based inflation as our official indicator of inflation, right. 2016 onwards our official indicator of inflation is CPI based inflation. So there are some drawbacks with WPI based inflation, and that is why we have left using it as our official indicator of inflation. So what are the drawbacks? Please write it down. Drawbacks of WPI based inflation. Drawbacks of WPI based inflation. लिखिए, the most important drawback is that the WPI includes only goods, है ना. लिखिए, WPI includes only goods, it doesn't include services. WPI includes goods only. It includes goods only. No services are included in the construction of WPI. No services are included in the construction of WPI. And this is the major drawback of our WPI. You find not a single service in the construction of WPI. You find no services have been included in the construction of WPI. You can see that all these 697 articles are commodity, they are not the services, right? But inflation is not the outcome of increase in prices of goods only. It can be due to increase in prices of services as well, isn't it? है ना? Inflation that we may have in the economy is the outcome of increase in prices of both prices of goods as well as prices of services. But here drawback with WPI based inflation is that here we consider inflation to be the outcome of increase in prices of goods only, as no services have been included. है ना? आ रहा कि नहीं समझ में आप लोगों को? अगर सर्विसेज भी महंगी हो जाएगी तो विल हैव द इन्फ्लेशन. लाइक अगर मान लो कि ट्रांसपोर्टेशन सर्विसेज महंगी हो गई, है ना, किराया आपसे ज़्यादा लिया जा रहा, बैंकिंग, इंश्योरेंस, कोचिंग सेंटर्स, है ना, ये सब मान लो कि महंगे हो गए, तो विल हैव द इम्पैक्ट ऑन इन्फ्लेशन. इन्फ्लेशन मस्ट बी राइजिंग ऑन द इंक्रीज इन प्राइसेस ऑफ सर्विसेज, है ना. सो द इन्फ्लेशन इज द कंबाइंड इफेक्ट ऑफ इंक्रीज इन प्राइसेस ऑफ बोथ goods as well as services. But here problem with WPI based inflation is that here no services have been included. So result of inflation is only on the basis of increase in price of goods, right? So this is the major drawback. And when you base your inflation on the prices of goods only, will that be an exact measure of inflation? Will that be an exact measure of inflation? No, because it is ignoring the prices of services. It doesn't consider the prices of services. So that inflation should not be the exact measure of price increase in the economy. आगे समझ में? ये इसका ड्रॉबैक था. सेकेंड ड्रॉबैक इज दैट लुक, इन्फ्लेशन जो है, इन्फ्लेशन ऑलवेज रिफ्लेक्ट्स व्हाट? Inflation always reflects our cost of living. ठीक है? इन्फ्लेशन जो होता है हमारे कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग का इंडिकेटर होता है ना. अगर इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीज होगा दैट मीन्स हमारा कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग भी क्या हो रहा, बढ़ रहा. यही तो है ना. तो हम लोगों के पास एक ऐसा इन्फ्लेशन होना चाहिए दैट exactly measure the cost of living of people, है ना. You must have the inflation that gives you an exact idea about what is the cost of living of people in our economy, in our society. But inflation based on WPI cannot reflect upon cost of living, because in cost of living we have the prices of services also, है ना. Our cost of living is determined on the basis of prices of services also, but here prices of services have been left altogether, right? So the inflation is not the exact one, and inflation drawback is that it doesn't reflect the cost of living of mass chunk of people, है ना. As a result of these two drawbacks laden with WPI, Urjit Patel committee advised the government that instead of using WPI as our official anchor of inflation, we must be using CPI, है ना. In CPI we have both, we have some goods as well as services, right? So inflation based on CPI is going to be more exact as compared to inflation based on WPI. First thing. Second thing, inflation based on CPI will reflect upon cost of living in a better manner, because it includes the prices of both goods as well as services, right? So now CPI based inflation has become our official anchor of inflation, and in the next segment we'll discuss the CPI based inflation, right? आगे समझ में आप लोग को? तो CPI based inflation जो है हमारे कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग को बेहतर तरीके से बता पाती है. इसके दो कारण हैं. फर्स्ट रीजन इज that it includes the prices of both goods and services, है ना, first reason. And second reason is that we common people make our purchase not from the wholesale market but from which market? Retail market, है ना. So obviously any increase and decrease in prices of commodities traded in retail market will impact common people, है ना. It will affect our cost of living if there is any change in prices of those articles, right? But cost of living of every group of people is not uniform or not same. है ना. Do you think that cost of living of people living in urban areas is same as cost of living of people in rural areas, or you find difference? Do you find difference in cost of living? We are back in your villages and here in Delhi. Do you find difference? You find difference? नींद आ रहा आपको? जाइए, आंख धो के आ जाइए. जाओ जाओ जाओ. है यहाँ पे, इनसे पूछ लीजिए, बता देगा आपको. कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग क्या बराबर होता है क्या? अलग अलग होता है या नहीं? क्या आपका कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग मेरे कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग के बराबर होगा? नहीं होगा. एक व्यक्ति गांव में रह रहा है, उसका कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग शहर में रहने वाले लोगों के कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग से क्या होगा? डिफरेंट होगा, है ना. सो we had we had been using 4 different variants of CPI, not the single one. 4 variants of CPI. ठीक है. And all of them were reflecting the cost of living of different groups of people. CPI. We had these 4 variants of CPI. CPI for IW, then CPI for AL, then CPI for RL, and then CPI for U and ME. These are 4 variants of CPI that reflect upon cost of living of 4 different group of people. This is CPI for industrial workers. CPI for IW, CPI for industrial workers. And this is CPI for agricultural labor. है ना? This is CPI for rural labor. And this is CPI for urban non-manual employees. है ना? This is CPI for urban non-manual employees. These are 4 different categories of workers, and since their cost of living are different, we have been using different measures of inflation to know about their cost of living. है ना? So if you find that CPI IW is 6%, let's suppose in the month of March 2022. Let's suppose this is what you find in newspaper. है ना? The newspaper is saying that CPI IW for the month of March 2022 is 6%. What does that mean? That means all the goods and services used by industrial workers in order to fulfill their needs have become expensive by 6% on an average past 1 year. Right? This is their inflation. This is their inflation. So all the articles used by industrial workers have become expensive past 1 year by 6%. So we'll say that their cost of living has increased by 6%. है ना? Likewise, you find that agriculture labor, this is minus 4%. Let's suppose this is minus 4% means what? There is deflation for them. है ना? The goods and services used by agriculture labor has become less expensive. है ना? It has become less expensive by 4% as compared to last year. Right? So their cost of living has reduced by 4% as compared to last year. This is how we used to measure the cost of living of 4 different groups of people. है ना? Using these 4 different variants of CPI. So you have only one variant of WPI. है ना? You have only one variant of WPI, but you have 4 different variants of CPI. Simply because using CPI we are estimating the cost of living, and since cost of living of one group of workers are different from another group of workers, so obviously there has to be some more variants of CPI, right? So this CPI used to reflect upon the cost of living of industrial workers. This is for agricultural labor, this is for rural labor, and this is for urban non-manual employees, right? Urban non-manual employees, है ना? Those employees who are living in urban areas but not working physically, they are working mentally, है ना? Like teachers, doctors, staff of banking, staff and employees of civil aviation, right? They are non-manual employees. You got this point? But now you see that not a single variant is there that reflects upon the cost of living of Indian people in aggregate, है ना? We are representing the cost of living of very small group of people. Like, industrial workers is very small group of total population. Even the agriculture labor, rural labor, they all represent a very small segment of total population of India. My point is that there has been no single variant that could say about the cost of living of Indian people, है ना? Not a single variant was there that could say about the cost of living of Indian people, है ना? All of them were reflecting the cost of living of very small group of people only, either for industrial workers or agricultural labor or rural labor. So from 2011 onwards, we started using 3 more variants of CPI, है ना? Now we are calculating 3 more variants of CPI. This is first CPI for urban areas, then second one is CPI for rural areas, and this is CPI combined. Combined means for the country as a whole, है ना? This is CPI for country or combined. You got this point? Now we are calculating inflation, retail inflation. CPI is all about retail inflation, है ना? CPI is all about retail inflation. So now we are calculating retail inflation area wise. You can see what is inflation in urban areas, what is inflation in rural areas, and what is inflation in our country as a combined, right? So instead of calculating inflation for different group of workers, look here guys, instead of calculating inflation for different group of workers that we used to do, now we are calculating inflation area wise. What is the inflation in urban areas, what is inflation in rural areas, and what is inflation in our country as combined, right? So if in the newspaper you find that CPI-U is 6% this month, that means inflation prevailing in urban area, retail inflation, not the wholesale inflation. Retail inflation prevailing in urban area is 6%. That means the articles used by urban people have become expensive on an average by 6% past 1 year. This is what we mean by 6% of inflation prevailing in urban areas, right? Then you will have the inflation for rural areas. Let's suppose this is 4%. That means commodities in urban areas that are used by people over there have become expensive by 4% past 1 year, right? Then we'll take the average of these two and we'll have the inflation for country as a whole, so this is 5%. This is inflation, retail inflation for Indian people, this is our inflation CPIC, and this is what Reserve Bank of India is targeting now under its new framework of monetary policy, right? We have seen that the RBI is mandated to control inflation between 2 to 6%. So which inflation RBI is targeting? It is the combined inflation, the inflation that is for the country as a whole, so this is what we started doing from 2011. Now inflation is being calculated area wise. What is inflation in urban areas, what is inflation in rural areas, and what is inflation in our country, right? But we have not stopped using this one, but their policy implications have completely changed, right? These 4 measures are now not used for the sake of calculation of inflation. Rather, they are being used to know what has been the increase in cost of living of different groups of people, so that their salary or wages can be accordingly revised, right? We have to revise the salary of different group of workers, है ना, as we all are confronted with the situation of inflation, and as a result of inflation our purchasing power keeps on coming down. So it is, mandatory that we just revise the salary and wages given to workers, and that we do on the basis of this measure, है ना. This reflect the cost of living or increase in cost of living of different group of workers, and on this basis we revise their salary or wages, right? And for the sake of calculation of retail inflation, we are using these three variants: CPI U, CPI R, and CPI C. सर्विसेज का भी प्राइस को हम यहाँ पे लेते हैं, है ना. सर्विसेज में कई तरह के सर्विसेज, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन, बैंकिंग, मैनेजमेंट, है ना, हेयर कट, हेयर कट इज सर्विस, लॉन्ड्री, है ना, सर्विसेज है. इसका प्राइस तो हम जानते हैं ना. वी गैदर द प्राइस फ्रॉम डिफरेंट मार्केट्स एंड देन देयर एवरेज इज बीइंग फाइंड आउट, राइट, है ना. इट्स नॉट फ्रॉम सिंगल मार्केट दैट प्राइस इज बीइंग गैदर्ड. We gather the prices from different markets and then an average price is being calculated. ठीक है क्या? No, even in the construction of WPI we gather the prices from different wholesale market, है ना, because we don't have the wholesale market confined in a single place. It's in Delhi, it's in Maharashtra, it's in Gujarat, it's in other states of India. We have the wholesale market where these 697 commodities are traded, है ना, and the prices of these 697 commodities could be differing from one state of India to another state of India, है ना. We gather their prices and then we find out the average price which are being फाइनली रिकॉर्डेड. ठीक है, आ रहा समझ में, है ना. उसका नहीं, जब तक हम लोग उसको रिवाइज नहीं करेंगे, जब तक कि उसको इंक्लूड नहीं किया जाएगा, तब तक उसका प्राइस से इन्फ्लेशन को हम लोग नहीं मेजर करेंगे, है ना. तो मैंने आपको बताया था WPI में वी हैव 697 गुड्स एंड हियर इन द कैलकुलेशन ऑफ CPI वी हैव 450 गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, है ना. सो इन्फ्लेशन इन द रिटेल मार्केट इज ऑल अबाउट increase in average price of these 450 goods and services, है ना. When the price of these 450 goods and services increases on an average, this is what we mean by CPI based inflation. Are you getting my point? So in the month of April, if we want to find out retail inflation, then we'll take the average price of these 450 goods, right, and then compare it with the average price prevailing last year. If there has been an increase, this is inflation. If there has been a decrease, this is deflation. आ गया समझ में आप लोग को? ये है आपका CPI. ये CPI का भी बेस ईयर जो है, बेस ईयर ऑफ CPI इज 2011-12, है ना, सेम बेस ईयर. ठीक है. इसको भी हम लोग रिवाइज करने वाले हैं, ये भी अभी रिवाइज होगा, है ना. अभी आपका 2011-12 ही है. Now we'll say which ministry or department of government of India publishes CPI based inflation, right? These three variants of CPI, CPI U, R and C, these are published by CPI U, R and C are published by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI, है ना. MOSPI एक मिनिस्ट्री है, इसका फुल फॉर्म है मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स एंड प्रोग्राम इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, है ना. लिखो MOSPI पब्लिशेस CPI बेस्ड इन्फ्लेशन एवरी मंथ, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स एंड प्रोग्राम implementation. But sometimes you are asked the department of this particular ministry which publishes CPI based inflation, right? A ministry consists of various departments. So sometimes you may be asked which department of this particular ministry is responsible for publication of CPI based inflation. So this department is called NSO, National Statistical Office, है ना? National Statistical Office under the Ministry of MOSPI publishes CPI based inflation. ठीक है? National Statistical Office under which ministry? MOSPI publishes CPI based inflation. National Statistical Office. क्या बता रहा हूं इसका, ये जो लास्ट है CPI UNME है ना, वी हैव लेफ्ट यूजिंग दिस सिंस 2010. 2010 से अब हमने इसे पब्लिश नहीं किया है ना, लेकिन ये 3 वेरिएंट्स को अभी भी हम पब्लिश कर रहे हैं. सो द फर्स्ट 3 इज पब्लिश्ड बाय मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ लेबर एंड एम्प्लॉयमेंट, है ना. These 3 variants of CPI is published by Ministry of Labor and Employment. And you will find that the same question has been asked by the UPSC in the year of 2016. This question was asked, which department publishes CPI IW? है ना? Department was asked, not the ministry. In 2016, UPSC had asked you the question, है ना, कि which department publishes CPI IW, not the ministry. So ministry is Ministry of Labor and Employment, and there is a department under this ministry which is called Labor Bureau. So correct option was Labor Bureau. Labor Bureau publishes all these first 3 variants of CPI. And CPI U, R and C, the new variants of CPI which are used to know about the inflation in retail market is by NSO, which is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. ठीक है, समझ में आया आप लोगों को? आकाश है क्या? देखना देखना, ये इसको ब्रेक चाहिए आप लोगों को? ठीक है, ब्रेक लीजिए आप लोग 5-10 मिनट का. इसको भी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स एंड प्रोग्राम इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, वो नहीं, वो करता था, है ना, लेकिन अब हम लोग नहीं कर रहे उसको. अच्छा ठीक है, यू टेक द ब्रेक ऑफ 5 to 10 minutes ना, देन विल रिज्यूम द क्लास. चलिए, फिर ये कंप्लीट हो गया आप लोगों का. सारा चीज़ मैंने आप लोगों को CPI और WPI के बारे में बताया है ना. और इसके बाद जो है विल सी द मेथड्स दैट वी कैन यूज टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन ना. लिखिए मेथड्स ऑफ कंट्रोलिंग इन्फ्लेशन, लिखिए लिखिए मेथड्स ऑफ कंट्रोलिंग इन्फ्लेशन. We'll discuss first monetary methods, or you say monetary measures. Second one is fiscal measures, and the last one is administrative measures. We'll discuss them one by one. We have already discussed monetary measures. under the chapter of Reserve Bank of India, right? Just here we give you the summary of what Reserve Bank of India does under monetary measures to control inflation, है ना? So first thing that you need to keep in your mind is that monetary measures are adopted by the central bank of the country to control inflation, है ना? लिखिए monetary measures. Monetary measures are adopted by the central bank of the country to control inflation. The central bank of the country to control inflation. मंजोत, नकुल, आप लोग हैं क्लास में? Are you there in the class? Fine. So we are discussing various measures of controlling of inflation, and the first one is monetary measures. Monetary measures are always adopted by the central bank of the country. Now you have to know what exactly Reserve Bank of India does under monetary measures, है ना? So under monetary measures, RBI, लिखिए, under monetary measures, the RBI controls supply of money. The Reserve Bank of India controls supply of money to reduce rate of inflation in the economy. To reduce rate of inflation in the economy. And this is done by implementing rate of inflation, and this is done by the RBI. This is done by the RBI by implementing contractionary monetary policy. ठीक है? So these are points related to monetary measures. We have already discussed what exactly Reserve Bank of India does, na? So under monetary measures, Reserve Bank of India reduces money supply to control inflation, because when money supply is reduced in the economy, that will cause aggregate demand to reduce, and finally this will bring down the prices, right? And for this, which kind of monetary policy is implemented? We have seen that there are two kinds of monetary policy. One is expansionary and second one is contractionary. So contractionary monetary policy is implemented, in which policy rate like repo rate can be increased, so that market rate of interest increases, and that will bring down the volume of credit, money supply, which will help Reserve Bank of India ultimately controlling of inflation, है ना? So only 3 points needs to be kept in your mind. Monetary measures are adopted by the central bank of the country. Under monetary measures, you can see money supply is controlled to control inflation, and to control money supply, which kind of monetary policy is implemented? This is the contractionary monetary policy, in which rate of interest is increased by the central bank of the country. Clear? Then we'll discuss these two new measures to control inflation. The first one is fiscal measures. देखिए fiscal measures. Yeah. ठीक है. Fiscal measures. Fiscal measures are used by government, है ना? Fiscal measures are used by government to control inflation. Under fiscal measures, government changes its policy on government changes its policy on public revenue and public expenditure. Government changes its policy on public revenue and public expenditure. So under fiscal, policy of the government, two important things are being included. The first is the public revenue or the revenue of the government. Public revenue or revenue of the government, and second one is public expenditure or expenditure of the government. These are two important components of fiscal policy, right? In the fiscal policy of the government, you have two important things: the revenue of the government and the expenditure of the government, right? So under fiscal measures, the government changes its policy relating to its revenue and its expenditure, right? Now we'll see the first one, the public revenue. What is the most important source of public revenue? Here public means government. So what is the most important source of government revenue? Taxation, है ना? Taxation. So to control inflation, the government will bring about changes in taxation policy, है ना? What changes are required to control inflation? That's what I am going to discuss with you, है ना? But before that, you must be knowing that there are two kinds of taxes prevailing in any of the economies, right? है ना? And those taxes are direct tax and indirect tax, है ना? So basically we have two kinds of taxes, and under fiscal measures, the government brings about changes in its revenue or taxation policy. And since taxation are of two kinds, the government may bring about changes in these two kinds of taxation. ठीक है? So first we'll see what we mean by direct and indirect tax, and then we'll see what exactly government does with respect to direct and indirect tax to control inflation, है ना? Do you know the difference between direct and indirect tax? What you mean by direct and indirect tax? ऐसा है, और जो सैलरी नहीं है, मेरा तो सैलरी कोई नहीं है. अच्छा, ठीक है. अच्छा. Nakul is saying that direct is one which is direct. Direct is one which is directly taken from citizens like income tax, है ना? Very good. And indirect tax like GST. तो देखो क्या है, आपको पता होना चाहिए कि अगर गवर्नमेंट हमारे इनकम और वेल्थ पे टैक्स लगाती है ना, तो वो डायरेक्ट टैक्स होता है. सो टैक्सेस ऑन इनकम एंड वेल्थ, टैक्सेस ऑन इनकम एंड वेल्थ आर डायरेक्ट टैक्स, है ना? फॉर एग्जाम्पल इनकम टैक्स इन इंडिया, दिस इज डायरेक्ट टैक्स, है ना? वेल्थ टैक्स इन आवर कंट्री, wealth tax, this is also a direct tax. But when tax is imposed on goods and services, they are called indirect taxes, है ना? So taxes on income and wealth, direct tax. Taxes on goods and services, taxes on goods and services, they are indirect tax, है ना? And that is why in our country indirect tax is called GST, goods and services tax, है ना? This is tax on goods and services, है ना? So the government imposes tax on our income wealth, it levies tax on goods and services also. They are respectively called direct and indirect tax. In order to control inflation, the government will have to bring about some changes in both the taxes. So now let's suppose there is the situation of inflation in the economy. Prices of articles are on the increase. So what needs to be done with direct tax or income tax? Let's say income tax. So what needs to be done with income tax? Whether income tax has to be increased or reduced to control inflation. Whether tax on our income should be increased or decreased to control inflation. गवर्नमेंट को क्या करना चाहिए? Fiscal policies are or fiscal measures are adopted by whom? The government. And under fiscal measures, the government bring about changes in its revenue and taxation policy and expenditure policy, right? So if we have to control inflation, what government needs to be doing with direct tax? Whether direct tax rate or income tax rate must be increasing or it must be decreasing. Yes, Manjot and Nakul, आप लोग बताएं कि if we have to fight with inflation, what we have to do with direct tax, whether income tax rate must be increased or reduced. Yes, income tax should be increased. And this will control inflation. In what manner? Because now we'll have to pay more taxes to the government. When we pay more taxes to the government, our spendable income will come down, isn't it? Our disposable income will come down as we'll have to pay more taxes out of our income to the government, है ना? तो इससे क्या होगा? एग्रीगेट डिमांड क्या होगा बताओ? हम अब ज्यादा टैक्स दे रहे गवर्नमेंट को. Now tax rate has been increased. This will cause our disposable income to come down. We're left with lower income, and this is going to impact aggregate demand in the economy. है ना? Aggregate demand will also come down, and this will help the government to reduce prices in the economy. है ना? This is how, by increasing the income tax rate or direct tax, the government can control inflation. And if this is done by government, this is called fiscal measures. In fiscal measures, the government will bring about changes in its taxation policy and the expenditure policy, right? है ना? In brief, you can say that in order to control inflation, direct tax must be increased. है ना? ठीक है? हम ज्यादा टैक्स देंगे तो हमारे पास पैसे कम हो जाएंगे. गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज खरीदने की जो हमारी कैपेसिटी है वो कम हो जाएगी. एग्रीगेट डिमांड विल टेक ए डेंट, है ना? एंड दैट विल कॉज प्राइस टू कम डाउन. एंड व्हाट अबाउट इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स? व्हाट अबाउट टैक्सेस ऑन गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज? विल दैट बी इंक्रीज्ड और रिड्यूस्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन? अरे तो जीएसटी काउंसिल में तो गवर्नमेंट ही है ना. जीएसटी काउंसिल कंसिस्ट ऑफ मेंबर्स फ्रॉम बोथ द गवर्नमेंट, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, है ना? सो टैक्सेस आर ऑलवेज इम्पोज्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट. नो अदर इंस्टीट्यूशंस और अथॉरिटीज in our country or any country, any economy is allowed to impose and collect the taxation. Taxation are prerogative of the government. हमेशा टैक्स गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा ही लगाया जाता है. कोई प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूशन टैक्स को इम्पोज नहीं कर सकती, टैक्स को कलेक्ट नहीं कर सकती है. ठीक है? देखिए, जब गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज में जीएसटी लगता है ना तो उसके प्राइस बढ़ जाते हैं. इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस जो होते हैं ना वो प्राइस को बढ़ा देता है. आपने देखा होगा कि जो प्राइस हम पे करते हैं उसमें सारे टैक्सेस इंक्लूड होते हैं, है ना? व्हेन यू बाय समथिंग यू लुक एट एमआरपी, है ना? लेट्स सपोज एमआरपी इज 1000 रुपीज, है ना? और यहाँ पे लिखा होता है इंक्लूसिव ऑफ ऑल टैक्सेस. देखो आप लोग, सो इन दिस प्राइस ऑफ 1000 रुपीज ऑल टैक्सेस, ऑल इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस हैव बीन इंक्लूडेड, है ना? So inclusion of taxation will inflate the price, will increase the price. So obviously when we have to control the inflation, we have to reduce the GST or taxes on goods and services. है ना? I give you the example. Let's suppose I am the supplier of this commodity, and this commodity attracts no GST, no taxation from the government. है ना? It is tax free. है ना. So when this is tax free, I am selling this commodity at 100 rupees. After some time, the government levies GST on this product, है ना. The government is saying कि sir, you are supplying this commodity, so you'll have to pay 5 rupees as GST per unit of marker, है ना. Now 5 rupees GST has been imposed on this product. So at what price I will sell this commodity now? When there was no taxation, I was selling this commodity at 100 rupees. Now 5 rupees I need to pay to the government by way of GST. So how much I will sell this product at? I will shift the entire burden of GST on buyers of this commodity, isn't it? So instead of charging 100 rupees as I was charging previously, now I will start charging 100 and this 5 rupees GST, 105 rupees, isn't it? You can see that due to inclusion of GST, the price of this commodity has increased from 100 rupees to 105 rupees, है ना. इसमें GST का रेट मान लो कि 10 रुपए रहता, तो प्राइस would have been further increased to 100 plus 10 rupees, 110 rupees. So as government levies on GST on goods and services, the price keeps on increasing, है ना. The price keeps on increasing with the imposition of taxation, with the imposition of GST. So if we want to control inflation, we'll have to bring down GST on goods and services, है ना. Indirect taxes must be reduced to control inflation. Let's suppose indirect taxes has been now finished. Here no indirect tax is being taken, then price will get reduced from 105 rupees to 100 rupees, and this is how we can control inflation, by lowering the GST or indirect tax on goods and services, right? So it's by increasing the direct tax we control inflation, and it's by lowering the GST or lowering the indirect taxes, we control inflation, है ना. लिख लो, इसको ब्रीफली लिख लो, है ना. By increasing direct tax we control inflation, and by lowering the GST or indirect taxes we can control inflation. Is that clear? Manjot and Nakul, is the point clear? ये सब बहुत ही प्रैक्टिकल चीज़ है. आप लोग अगर मान लो कि मोबाइल फ़ोन पे जो है GST बढ़ जाएगा तो इसका प्राइस बढ़ेगा या नहीं, है ना. क्योंकि इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स का बर्डन बायर्स के ऊपर आता है ना. While paying the price for the goods and services, we pay the indirect tax even, है ना. So मान लो कि इसका 25,000 रुपीज़ मैंने पे किया है, तो that includes even the GST. And if GST on this product would have been lower, obviously the price would have been lower than 25,000 rupees, isn't it? So whenever we have to control inflation, reduce the prices in the economy, the government should ensure that lower rate of GST is being imposed on goods and services, right? आगे समझ में? So these are fiscal measures in which some changes in taxation policy are introduced by the government with an objective of controlling of inflation, right? Second component of fiscal policy is the expenditure of the government, है ना. In the fiscal policy we have two components basically that are being considered. One is the revenue of the government, public revenue, and second one is expenditure of the government, right? So under fiscal measures, even the expenditure of the government can be changed to control inflation, right? So what you think, what we must do, whether we should increase government expenditure or government expenditure should be reduced to control inflation? बताइए. अगर हमें इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल करना है तो व्हाट वी हैव टू डू विद गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर? Okay, Manjot is saying that we need a government should decrease government expenditure. Nakul is also saying that we should reduce government expenditure. Is that so? बोलो। यस। देखिए, जब गवर्नमेंट पैसे खर्च करती है ना, तो उससे इन्फ्लेशन होता है। मान लो कि गवर्नमेंट जो है अलग अलग और नए नए प्रोजेक्ट्स पे पैसे खर्च कर रही है, ऑन द कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ नेशनल हाईवे, on the constructions of schools and colleges, on the constructions of power plants, on the constructions of railways, airports, dams, है ना? All these infrastructures are being constructed by the government. So government is spending lots of money on all these projects, right? So finally, all this expenditure becomes income for those group of people who are getting the jobs in all these government projects, right? The engineers will get the jobs in these projects. The labor force of India will get the employment in all these projects, right? So when government spend money, right, that becomes income for some group of people. So money supply will increase in the economy, isn't it? Money will enter into the economy. है ना? Initially it was in the hands of the government. Now government started spending them. So that becomes income for some group of people, right? Money supply increases, that becomes, source of demand in the economy. Aggregate demand will increase, and that cause price to increase. We'll have inflation as a result of massive public expenditure, right? So obviously if we have to control inflation, public expenditure must be curtailed, है ना? It must be reduced. हाँ, समझ में आ गया ना? जब गवर्नमेंट पैसा खर्च करेगी ना, तो वो लोगों के हाथ में पैसा जाएगा यार। कई प्रोजेक्ट्स पे गवर्नमेंट पैसे खर्च कर रही है ना? वो सारे एक्सपेंडिचर जो है लोगों के हाथ में आएंगे, है ना? कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स को यहाँ पे पैसे मिलेंगे गवर्नमेंट से, एम्प्लॉयज़ को यहाँ पे पैसे मिलेंगे, इंजीनियर्स को वहाँ पे पैसा मिलेगा, सप्लायर ऑफ वेरियस रॉ मटेरियल दैट आर बीइंग यूज्ड in various projects of government will get the money from the government. So what do you find? Spending by government creates income in the hands of some group of people, right? Our money supply increases, and that cause aggregate demand to increase, ultimately having inflation in the economy. So to control inflation, the government expenditure needs to be decreased, है ना? लिख लो, expenditure needs to be reduced to control inflation. हाँ, फिजिकल मेजर्स में, फिजिकल मेजर्स में दोनों कंपोनेंट्स आ रहे हैं, टैक्स का भी आ रहा है, एक्सपेंडिचर का भी आ रहा है ना? वी हैव बोथ द कंपोनेंट्स अंडर फिजिकल मेजर्स. सो गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर नीड्स टू बी रिड्यूस्ड टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन, टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन. ठीक है, हो गया. लेकिन हमारे कंट्री में गवर्नमेंट क्या करेगी, हम लोग उस पर डिस्कस नहीं कर रहे हैं, है ना? what we are discussing is what can be done by the government and the central bank to control inflation, right? Whether those measures are appropriate for our economy or not, that is something different. Like so far as government expenditure is considered, and let's suppose we advise the government that you have to reduce the expenditure to control inflation. In fact, that's going to hamper the process of development of infrastructure in our country, है ना? So that should not be the measure we need to adopt in our country to control inflation, right? Because if government expenditure get reduced, that will hamper the process of infrastructure building in our country. क्या क्या होगा? हाँ, जीडीपी में भी कमी आएगा, है ना? तो जीडीपी की बात तो छोड़िए, है ना? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को हम लोग डेवलपमेंट्स के लिए लॉन्चिंग पैड मानते हैं. विदाउट दैम वी कैनॉट हैव ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट इन द इकोनॉमी. वी हैव ए गुड नेटवर्क ऑफ ऑल द सोशल एंड फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर लाइक रोड्स, पावर प्लांट्स, है ना, एयरपोर्ट्स, डैम्स, बैराज, canal. They must be in good numbers with good networks. Then only we can think of making progress by leaps and bounds, right? But when you suggest the government that you should control your expenditure so that we can control the inflation, that's not something advisable. But for a country like US, where we already have the good network of infrastructure, inflation can be controlled in that country by controlling of government expenditure, right? But not in case of Indian economy. So right now we are not discussing what we must be doing. Rather, we are discussing various measures that can be adopted to control inflation in the economy. And the third one is administrative measures. है ना? We have discussed the fiscal measures, monetary measures before that, and third one is administrative measures. लिखिए administrative measures. लिखिए under administrative measures, please write it down. Under administrative measures, some decisions and actions are initiated. Some decisions and actions are initiated, and action are initiated to control inflation. है ना? To control inflation. So now we'll see what decisions and what actions on the part of the administration will help us curbing the menace of inflation. है ना? हम लोग देखेंगे कि क्या decisions लिया जाता है और क्या actions लिया जाता है administration के द्वारा, है ना? तो इसको मैं एग्जाम्पल से आपको समझा रहा हूँ. You must be knowing that prices of pulses in our country has been on increase for the last 7 to 8 years of time continuously. Every year you find that prices of pulses are increasing. So why the prices of pulses are increasing? Because we have not been able to fulfill the domestic requirement, right? Our domestic requirement is to the extent of 32 million ton every year, है ना? But we have been able to produce only 26 to 27 million ton every year. So there is a deficit to the extent of 6 to 7 million ton every year, है ना? India is the largest producer of pulses, but we have to know that we are the largest consumer of pulses even, right? We fulfill the requirement of protein by using pulses, है ना? So we are the largest consumer of pulses, we are the largest producers of pulses, but we find that there has been a gap in our productions and consumptions. We require 32 million ton every year, but we have been able to produce only 26 to 27 million of ton of pulses. So there is a deficit, and those deficit in the production of pulses cause prices of pulses to increase every year, है ना? प्राइस बढ़ते चला जाता है. So how we tend to reduce the price of pulses? What decision precisely are taken by the government or the administration to reduce the prices of pulses? बोलिए. हाँ, क्या? That's something very time consuming process. When you introduce technology, and you don't know what will happen, and so what immediate decisions are taken to reduce the prices of pulses in the economy? We decide to import pulses from other countries, isn't it? We decided to import pulses from other countries, and that way, yes, so what? But we are the largest consumer, and our consumption has been more than the production. Our consumption has been more than the production, so it is obvious for the country to import, है ना? We import mostly from African countries, है ना? There is a country in Africa, Mozambique, है ना? So we have been importing pulses in large quantity from Mozambique, and that cause domestic supply to increase, and finally price comes down. आगे समझ में? हम इंपोर्ट करेंगे तो डोमेस्टिक अवेलेबिलिटी जो है बढ़ेगी ना, ठीक है? उससे प्राइस क्या हो जाएगा? कम हो जाएगा. तो इंपोर्ट करने का डिसीजन जो होता है किसका होता है? ये हमारे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का डिसीजन होता है। कॉमर्स मिनिस्ट्री के अंदर में एक ऑटोनोमस बॉडी है, इसका नाम है डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ फॉरेन ट्रेड। डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ फॉरेन ट्रेड। So all the decisions regarding import and export are taken by this administrative body, है ना? So this is an administrative decision by which we can control inflation through imports, है ना? We can control inflation through imports. ठीक है? आया समझ में? This is Director General of Foreign Trade. This particular body under the Ministry of Commerce is responsible for taking all the decisions regarding import and export of commodities. What else? और क्या करना चाहिए एट द टाइम ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन? हमें बताइए, एक्सपोर्ट ज़्यादा करना चाहिए कि कम करना चाहिए? अगर इन्फ्लेशन है, यस आप कह रही हैं ज़्यादा करना चाहिए, सो हाउ दैट्स गोइंग टू हेल्प कंट्रोलिंग ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन? हमें एक्सपोर्ट ज़्यादा करना है आप कह रही हैं टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन, बट हाउ दैट हेल्प्स अस कंट्रोलिंग ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन? आप जब ज़्यादा एक्सपोर्ट कर दोगे ना तो डोमेस्टिक सप्लाई तो और कम हो जाएगा ना। एक्सपोर्ट करने का मतलब क्या है? यू सेंड गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज आउट ऑफ द इंडिया, है ना? सेंडिंग गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज आउटसाइड इंडिया इज कॉल्ड आवर एक्सपोर्ट। सो एक्सपोर्ट से इन्फ्लेशन तो और बढ़ जाएगा यार, है ना? क्योंकि जब हम एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे तो डोमेस्टिक सप्लाई कम हो जाएगी एंड दैट विल इन्फ्लेट प्राइसेस इन आवर कंट्री। और इसलिए आपने देखा होगा कि व्हेन वी हैव इन्फ्लेशन ऑफ सर्टेन कमोडिटीज, लाइक you come across the news of inflation in onion, है ना? So when the prices of onion increases, we find that government imposes ban on the export of onion. The farmers and the traders are not allowed to export onion outside India until and unless we have inflation in the economy. Are you getting my point? है ना? So we ban the export, or we put some restrictions. We put some restrictions on export in order to control inflation. And this decision is again taken by Director General of Foreign Trade. है ना? So these are two important administrative decisions which are taken by the administration in order to control inflation. है ना? Of importing goods and services from other countries and putting ban or restrictions on export of commodities which have been under the impact of inflation. ठीक है? हाँ, उसके लिए एमएसपी पॉलिसी है, मैं आपको पढ़ाऊंगा। गवर्नमेंट इंसेंटिवाइज कर सकती है फार्मर्स को, है ना? नहीं, आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि हमारे फार्मर्स के पास नॉलेज नहीं है। वो नहीं, हम लोग, वो अलग बात है कि हम लोग नए टेक्नोलॉजी को अडॉप्ट नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, लेकिन किसानों को, हमारे देश के किसानों के बहुत ही ज़्यादा नॉलेज है। परंपरागत ज्ञान, प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज उनको बहुत ही ज़्यादा है। मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल देता हूँ। ये जो पूरा आपका गैंगेटिक रीजन है ना, गंगा का जो एरिया है आपका पूरा, है ना, काफ़ी फर्टाइल है, आप लोग जानते हैं, है ना? इट इज़ द मोस्ट फर्टाइल एरिया ऑफ आवर कंट्री। लेकिन इसमें फ्लड की समस्या है इन एरियाज़ में, है ना? आपका ईस्टर्न उत्तर प्रदेश, बिहार, आपका पश्चिम बंगाल, है ना? दिस एरियाज आर फ्लड प्रोन, है ना? तो यहाँ के किसानों ने अपने ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज का प्रयोग करते हुए ऐसे प्लांट्स के सीड तैयार किए हैं दैट विल रिमेन अनअफेक्टेड बाय फ्लड, है ना, एंड दो सीड्स आर कॉल्ड फ्लड रेजिस्टेंट सीड्स, राइट, है ना। मैं आई बिलोंग टू ओडिशा, है ना, आई बिलोंग टू ओडिशा। ओडिशा कोस्टल एरिया है, समुद्री इलाका है ना। तो समुद्री इलाका में क्या होता है, वहाँ पे लैंड में आप नमक, सॉल्ट का कंटेंट जो है ज़्यादा होता है, एंड दैट्स नॉट गुड फॉर द ग्रोथ ऑफ प्लांट और सैपलिंग्स, है ना, दैट हैम्पर्स द ग्रोथ ऑफ प्लांट एंड सैपलिंग्स, राइट, है ना। नाउ यूजिंग द ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज ऑफ यूजिंग द ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज, farmers of Orissa have developed a particular kind of seed which is salt resistant. So the impact of salt will be completely nullified and plant will have the normal growth even though we have the content of salt in a large quantity, right. It is on the basis of what, our traditional knowledge, but the problem is that our farmers have not been able to take the patents for all these things, right, and those people are very clever. अमेरिका तुलसी में भी अपना पेटेंट को देख रही है कि तुलसी हमारा है, हल्दी हमारा है ना, बट हम लोग कमर्शियलाइज नहीं कर रहे चीज़ों को, ये प्रॉब्लम है। तो वी हैव द नॉलेज बट हम लोग कमर्शियल बेसिस पे ज़्यादा नहीं सोचते हैं, ठीक है। एनीवेज, ये हो गया। अब हम लोग देखेंगे कि व्हाट एक्शन इज अंडरटेकन बाय द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन, है ना। ये दो डिसीजन से हम लोग इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं, बट नाउ विल सी व्हाट एक्शन कैन बी टेकन बाय द administration to control inflation. So sometimes inflation is the outcome of stockpiling of essential commodities by traders, है ना। Sometimes in order to reap the benefits, more and more benefits or profits, the grain trader, what they do, they stockpile essential commodities in large quantities, and that cause paucity of those articles in open market, their price start increasing, है ना। So now our administration go to such places, they conduct raid in such places and supply the commodity in the market, and that helps controlling of inflation. And this action is initiated by the administration under the pretext of a law in our country, है ना। This is called Essential Commodities Act, है ना। There is a legislation in our country which is called Essential Commodity Act, which was passed in the parliament in 1955. And in this Essential Commodities Act, we have specified some commodities as essential, and essential commodities cannot be stockpiled beyond a certain limit. If someone stockpile them beyond that limit, that would be illegal, right. So our administration will take action against those traders who stockpile their essential commodity beyond that limit, right. So generally this is done in our country. Traders, in order to reap the profit, है ना, magnitude of higher profit, they always stockpile the essential commodity like grain and vegetables, and that cause prices in the open market to increase as there is dearth of them for the consumptions, right. हाँ, ये था, लेकिन अब उसको रिपील कर दिया गया, वापस ले लिया गया है। नाउ देयर हैज बीन नो अमेंडमेंट इन एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट, सो एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट रिमेन्स एज इट वाज देयर इन द इकोनॉमी, राइट। So this is a very important legislation in our country. In this legislation, some commodities have been specified as essential. The stockpiling has been prohibited, or the piling can be done up to some limit only. Beyond that, that becomes unlawful, right. But traders usually violate the provision of Essential Commodity Act and they stockpile beyond that limit, right. So now administration under this act will conduct searches on such places, and eventually the commodity will be released into the market that will augment the supply, will cause prices to come down. This is the action under the administrative measures, ठीक है, आया समझ में। चलिए, ये आपका ये कंप्लीट हो गया। वो कैसे कंट्रोल करेंगे, बट ये मैंने आप लोग को कुछ ऐसे मेजर्स बताए दैट कैन बी अडॉप्टेड बाय एवरी इकोनॉमीज इन द वर्ल्ड, है ना। बट समटाइम्स local conditions are responsible for inflation in a particular economy. You have to identify the local conditions that are responsible for inflation in the economy. Yeah. These measures can be taken by the government, the central bank all over the world, right? Like when we have inflation, the central bank needs to increase the rate of interest, or the government needs to increase the income tax rate, reduce the GST. That can be done by the government all over the world, right? But there are some local factors responsible for inflation in the economy. So while suggesting the ways by which we can control inflation, we have to identify the local factors responsible for inflation and provide the appropriate suggestions, right? So in context of Indian economy, can you give me one or two factors which are responsible for inflation in our country? What local factors are there which have been responsible for inflation in our country? Hmm. क्या हुआ था? टिड्डा टिड्डा का? अच्छा। कहाँ कहाँ हुआ, तो नहीं हुआ था? कहाँ हो पाया? तो आप क्या लिखोगे? टिड्डा की वजह से इन्फ्लेशन हो गया? इंडिया में आपको क्या लग रहा कि व्हाट फैक्टर्स आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इन्फ्लेशन? Someone is saying that, sir, production is not sufficient to fulfill the requirements of domestic economy, so that we have inflation in the economy. But that is a very general cause of inflation everywhere. When production is not in accordance with the demand, then price will start inflating, है ना। आप एक स्पेसिफिक कारण बताइए जिसकी वजह से। मॉनसून हो सकता है ना। ठीक है, मॉनसून कुड बी द लोकल फैक्टर, है ना, दैट कुड बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर इन्फ्लेशन इन आवर कंट्री। जैसे अगर किसी भी साल में मॉनसून इनएडिक्वेट रहता है, insufficient रहता है, तो will have the food inflation, and food inflation will later on snowball into overall inflation in our country. Yes, government policy could be. Hmm. हाँ, इरिगेशन फैसिलिटी की बात कर रहे हैं आप, है ना। अगर इरिगेशन फैसिलिटी जो है वो आपका एडिक्वेट नहीं है, तो आई मीन फार्मिंग जो है दैट विल बी डिपेंडिंग ऑन मानसून, एंड मानसून इज़ नॉट रेगुलर, सो इट्स ए काइंड ऑफ गैम्बल, है ना। अगर मानसून सही है तो यू विन द सिचुएशन, एंड इफ मानसून इज़ नॉट दैट गुड देन यू हैव टू लूज द क्रॉप्स एंड योर इनकम, है ना। सो वी हैव टू डेवलप द इरिगेशन फैसिलिटीज़। अच्छा, प्रोडक्शन लिंक्ड इंसेंटिव बोल रहे हैं। हम्म। क्या? वो कुछ दूसरा है, मैं आप लोग को कुछ और पूछ रहा हूँ और आप लोग हाँ, लोकल फैक्टर क्या है, इंडिया में इन्फ्लेशन क्यों है? लुक, इन्फ्लेशन इन इंडिया इज प्राइमरली ड्रिवन बाय फूड इन्फ्लेशन, है ना। इन्फ्लेशन इन आवर कंट्री इज प्राइमरली ड्रिवन बाय फूड इन्फ्लेशन, ठीक है। फूड इन्फ्लेशन की वजह से ज़्यादातर भारत में इन्फ्लेशन होता है. नाउ नाउ यू नीड टू फाइंड आउट व्हाई फूड इन्फ्लेशन इज देयर. Why prices of some essential food grains keeps on increasing year by year? Yes, why food inflation is there? आप लोग न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ रहे हैं? एनसीईआरटी पढ़ रहे हो? लगता तो नहीं है मुझे. चलिए, कौन सा चैप्टर पढ़ा है आपने, बताओ. अभी रिसेंटली आपने एनसीईआरटी का कौन सा चैप्टर पढ़ा है, मुझे बताइए. क्लास 11 का फर्स्ट चैप्टर, ठीक है. आप सारे पढ़ लिए? व्हाट यू मीन बाय सनराइज इंडस्ट्रीज? व्हाट यू मीन बाय सनराइज इंडस्ट्रीज? हम्म. आप सारा पढ़ लिए हैं? आप सारा एनसीईआरटी पढ़ चुके हैं? हाँ. नहीं, इकोनॉमिक्स का ही मैं बोल रहा हूँ. ओके, व्हाट यू मीन बाय liberalization of economy? The concept of liberalization has been explained in third chapter of class 11th NCERT. So what you understand by liberalization? हम्म. कुछ भी बोल दे रहे हो यार. मैं पूछ रहा हूँ कि what you mean by liberalization of economy and what exactly is done by the government under the process of liberalization. Okay, what you mean by convertibility of Indian rupee? Convertibility of Indian rupee. Convertibility of Indian rupee. What is MERS? When CCI was implemented in our country? आप तो एनसीईआरटी पढ़े हो ना. ऐसे नहीं होगा, आप लोग को एनसीईआरटी पढ़ना है. नहीं तो फिर नहीं समझ में आएगा, डिस्कशन आपके लिए बेकार हो जाएगा क्लास. है ना? कोई फायदा नहीं मिलेगा. आपको अपनी नॉलेज और अंडरस्टैंडिंग को इंक्रीज करना होगा. आप लोग एनसीईआरटी को स्टार्ट ही नहीं किया है. ये सारी चीज़ आपके एनसीईआरटी से मैं पूछ रहा हूँ, अलग से नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ मैं. और आप बोलोगे तो मैं आपको पेज नंबर भी बता दूंगा, घर पे जाके देख लेना, इन विच पेज ऑल दिस थिंग्स हैव बीन स्पेसिफाइड along with the चैप्टर नंबर्स. है ना, चैप्टर नंबर भी मैं बताऊंगा आपको. क्यों मैं गलत बोल रहा हूँ? देखो, पढ़ना जरूरी है, उससे ज़्यादा जरूरी है चीज़ों को समझना. पढ़कर मत छोड़ दो, उसको समझो. है ना, जब तक नहीं समझेंगे चीज़ को, आपके लिए वो बेकार होगा पढ़ना. है ना, आपने पढ़ा लेकिन कोई चीज़ याद नहीं है, कोई चीज़ को समझे नहीं हो, तो क्या फ़ायदा हुआ पढ़कर? क्यों मैं गलत बोल रहा हूँ? इसलिए आप लोग न्यूज़पेपर ले रहे हो, न्यूज़पेपर. हाँ तो बोलते हो भैया, न्यूज़पेपर ले रहे हो? पढ़ते हो या पढ़ते हो? नहीं. हाँ जी मैडम, आप नहीं ले रहे हो? कौन सा न्यूज़पेपर? आज पढ़े हो, एडिटोरियल पढ़े हो हिंदू का? कल इंडियन एक्सप्रेस पढ़ा था। आज पढ़े हो आप? उसमें फोटो देखा होगा तुमने, रंगीन पेज देखा होगा। ठीक है, यहाँ पे इन्होंने रिप्लाई किया है, लिबरलाइजेशन इज लेस रिस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम व्हेन यू रिड्यूस द कंट्रोल एक्सरसाइज बाय द गवर्नमेंट, दिस इज व्हाट वी मीन बाय लिबरलाइजेशन ऑफ इकोनॉमी, है ना? सो अंडर लिबरलाइजेशन ऑफ द इकोनॉमी द गवर्नमेंट, गवर्नमेंट रिलैक्सेस और रिमूव इट्स कंट्रोल ओवर द इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम। गवर्नमेंट का जो कंट्रोल रहता है उसको गवर्नमेंट क्या करती है, उसको रिलैक्स कर देती है या उसको रिमूव कर देती है। दैट इज व्हाट वी मीन बाय लिबरलाइजेशन ऑफ द इकोनॉमी। लाइक पहले क्या था कि इंडस्ट्रियल यूनिट्स को सेटअप करने के लिए हमें लाइसेंस की ज़रूरत थी। सो लाइसेंस वो समथिंग इट वाज अकिन टू control exercised by the government in the establishment of industry, right? But now government is saying that no license is required. You can set up your industries as and when and where you want, right? So here control has been removed. Control has been finished. This is what we mean by liberalization. इकोनॉमी को आप लिबरल बना रहे हो, आप अपने कंट्रोल को क्या कर रहे हो, रिमूव कर रहे हो, खत्म कर रहे हो। दैट इज व्हाट वी मीन बाय लिबरलाइजेशन ऑफ इकोनॉमी, है ना? सो आप लोग दो चीज़ करो, आप लोग का जो थोड़ा सा जनरल नॉलेज का ये अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो होनी चाहिए यूपीएससी एस्पिरेंट्स के लिए जो है अभी कम है, बहुत कम है। आपको बहुत मेहनत करने की ज़रूरत है ना? जस्ट यू कम टू द क्लास एंड टेक द लेक्चर्स, दैट्स नॉट गोइंग टू हेल्प यू इन एनी वेज, है ना? आपको सेल्फ स्टडी ही आईएएस ऑफिसर बना सकता है। कोई भी कोचिंग, कोई भी टीचर्स आपको आईएएस ऑफिसर नहीं बनाएगा, है ना? हम आपको एक डायरेक्शन देंगे, हम आपको कुछ गाइडलाइंस देंगे, मेहनत आपको करना है, ठीक है? इसलिए आप लोग न्यूज़पेपर को पढ़ना स्टार्ट करें, वो आपके लिए हेल्पफुल होगा, ठीक है? तो आज से न्यूज़पेपर आप लोग लेंगे और उसको पढ़िएगा भी, ठीक है? द हिंदू या इंडियन एक्सप्रेस, दोनों में से एक को आप लोग पढ़ सकते हैं। क्यों, आप लोग को तो बताया गया होगा क्लास में, आपको ओरिएंट तो किया गया होगा ना क्लास में। कहाँ से आए हो आप लोग यार? ये दो चीज़ को आप लोग कीजिए, है ना? एनसीईआरटी को बहुत अच्छे से पढ़िए, न्यूज़पेपर को आप अच्छे से पढ़िए, और मेरा क्लास को आप लोग रिवाइज करें बार बार। अगर आप डिस्कशन में पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करोगे, इंटरेस्ट नहीं दिखाओगे, तो फिर आपको ही प्रॉब्लम आएगी, आप ही चीज़ों को नहीं सीख पाएंगे। आपको यहाँ पे एक्टिवली पार्टिसिपेट करना होगा। यू हैव टू टेक इंटरेस्ट इन द डिस्कशन गोइंग इन द क्लास, है ना? And if your involvement is not there in the class, you are mentally absent in the class, then obviously your teachers is not going to help you in any of the ways, right? It's only when you start taking interest in the subject or the topic that is going on, then teachers will put lots of efforts, and that's going to help you getting the knowledge and inputs. तो ये चीज़ को कीजिए आप लोग। ऐसे साइलेंटली आप लोग क्लास में बैठेंगे विदाउट टेकिंग एनी इंटरेस्ट, सो हम लोग तो क्या है, हम लोग सिलेबस कंप्लीट करके चले जाएंगे, बट दैट्स नॉट गोइंग टू हेल्प यू इन एनी ऑफ द वेज, है ना? इसलिए बीइंग द एस्पिरेंट ऑफ यूपीएससी, वो आपके बिहेवियर में नज़र आना चाहिए, है ना? वो आपके डेली लाइफ में रिफ्लेक्ट होना चाहिए कि आप यूपीएससी की तैयारी कर रहे हो। यहाँ से क्या पता चला, बैग उधर फेंका, आप सो गए हैं, आप सो के उठ रहे हो 11 बजे 12 बजे, क्लास में सो जा रहे हो आप, कोई टाइम टेबल नहीं है ना? तो ऐसा नहीं होगा, आपको एक टाइम टेबल फिक्स करना होगा। न्यूज़पेपर मुझे पढ़ना है, उसके आर्टिकल से मुझे चीज़ों को नोट डाउन करना है ना, उसका समरी लिखना है मुझे, है ना, देखना है कि आर्टिकल्स जो आए हैं कि टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट दैट इज रिलेटेड टू आवर टॉपिक, है ना, सारा टॉपिक्स आपके सामने होना चाहिए। आपको सिलेबस पता है, व्हाट यू आर गोइंग टू स्टडी इन इकोनॉमिक्स, डू नो द सिलेबस? आप लोग एक ही टॉपिक का नाम बताइए जो कि आप लोग को पढ़ना है। जीडीपी। हम्म। बोलिए भाई साहब। हाँ। इंडियन इकॉनमी। इंडियन इकॉनमी में क्या पढ़ना है? कोई टॉपिक जो कि यूपीएससी के द्वारा सिलेबस के रूप में प्रेस्क्राइब किए गए हैं। हैव यू सीन द सिलेबस प्रेस्क्राइब्ड बाय द यूपीएससी? हैव यू गॉन टू द वेबसाइट ऑफ यूपीएससी? यू हैव गॉन ना, है ना, तो यस। आप एक टॉपिक का नाम बताओ जो कि यूपीएससी के द्वारा प्रेस्क्राइब किया गया है इन जीएस पेपर 3। एंड नकुल इज सेइंग इंडियन इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम, कुछ भी बोल दे रहे हो आप लोग। हम्म। किसको देख रहे थे? अरे, जीएस स्कोर जो है या कोई कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट्स आपको सिलेबस नहीं देती है ना। यूपीएससी का सिलेबस आपको यूपीएससी के द्वारा दिया जाता है। तो यूपीएससी ने आपको बता रखा है कि इन इन टॉपिक को पढ़ना है आपको। क्या आपने वो टॉपिक्स देखे हैं? तो नाम बताइए। कुछ एक टॉपिक का नाम बताइए आप लोग। तो याद होना चाहिए ना। अब आप न्यूज़पेपर्स पढ़ेंगे तो कौन से न्यूज़ आर्टिकल को पढ़ें और कौन से आप छोड़ें, ये कैसे डिसाइड करोगे? जब आपको टॉपिक याद होगा ना, जैसे मान लो कि वहां पे आपको पढ़ना है इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ के बारे में पढ़ना है, लेट्स सपोज, है ना, दिस टॉपिक हैज बीन प्रेस्क्राइब्ड बाय द यूपीएससी इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ, है ना। तो जब आपको याद है इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ आपको पढ़ना है, तो अगर न्यूज़पेपर में इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ के ऊपर कोई आर्टिकल आया है आज, दैट मीन्स दिस आर्टिकल इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, है ना। वो डायरेक्टली आपके सिलेबस को क्या कर रहा है ना, तब तो आप उस पर एम्फेसाइज करोगे। आपको टॉपिक ही पता नहीं है यार, तो क्या आप पढ़ोगे क्या नहीं पढ़ोगे, है ना। ऐसे थोड़ा सा देख लिया, फिर टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया पीछे का पेज देखता होगा ये, है ना, फोटो वोटो देख लिया, खत्म। उससे नहीं हो पाएगा, है ना। आज जाके आप लोग जीएस पेपर 3 का, यूपीएससी के वेबसाइट में जाकर जीएस पेपर 3 का जो है सिलेबस को निकालोगे और उसका फोटोकॉपी करके जो है जहाँ पे टेबल पे आप पढ़ते हैं उसको आप वहाँ पे पूरा पेस्ट करके रखेंगे, है ना। लाइए, उसमें कुछ लिखा है ना, जैसे क्या है, मोबिलाइजेशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेस है, प्लानिंग है ना, इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट एंड ग्रोथ है, इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ है, सब्सिडी है, लैंड रिफॉर्म्स इन इंडिया है ना, एग्रीकल्चर मार्केटिंग सिस्टम है, एग्रीकल्चर प्राइस पॉलिसी है, गवर्नमेंट बजट है। देखिए ये सारे सिलेबस जो है वहाँ पे लिखा गया है। ये सारा चीज़ जो है आपको याद होना चाहिए। सिलेबस को ही आप लोग पहले मगअप करो, रटो उसे। वो सारा चीज़ जो है दिमाग में आपको इम्प्रिंट होना चाहिए। यू मस्ट बी वेरी स्पेसिफिक एज टू व्हाट टू डू, व्हाट टू रीड एंड व्हाट नॉट टू रीड, है ना। वो बहुत बहुत स्पेसिफिकली जो है आपके दिमाग में फिट होना चाहिए, है ना। नहीं तो ऐसे ही इट्स जस्ट लाइक ग्रोपिंग इन द डार्क, है ना, जस्ट लाइक इन द ग्रोपिंग इन द डार्क। तो दैट विल नॉट हेल्प, दैट्स लीड्स यू नो वेयर एट ऑल। एक साल के बाद भी आप यहीं पे रहोगे। लेकिन आपके पास अगर सिलेबस है, आप जानते हो कि आपको वो चीज़ पढ़ना है, देन यू विल स्टार्ट गैदरिंग इंफॉर्मेशंस एंड कंटेंट ऑन ऑल दोज टॉपिक्स, है ना। आपके पास सारा टॉपिक्स का कंटेंट हो जाएगा एंड यू विल स्टार्ट रीडिंग दैम। तो ये चीज़ को पहले आपको आज करना है, ठीक है। करेंगे आप लोग? इसको करना है आप लोग को, है ना, नहीं तो फिर नहीं होगा। ऐसे आके क्लास में बैठ के चाहोगे तो आपको फ़ायदा नहीं मिलेगा। पहले यू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम जीएस पेपर 3, है ना, यू टेक द प्रिंट आउट ऑफ जीएस पेपर 3 सिलेबस प्रेस्क्राइब बाय द यूपीएससी फॉर बोथ मेंस एज वेल एज प्रीलिम्स, है ना। देन हैव द फोटोकॉपी ऑफ दिस सिलेबस एंड पेस्ट इट ऑन द वॉल वेयर यू स्टडी, ठीक है। और डेली आप उन टॉपिक्स को देखिए क्या क्या पढ़ना है, दैट विल हेल्प यू, यू नो, कीपिंग इन माइंड द थिंग्स दैट यू हैव टू गो थ्रू। फिर जब आप न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ोगे या कोई चीज़ पढ़ोगे तो आप समझोगे, उसको रिलेट कर पाओगे कि हाँ ये टॉपिक्स का संबंध जो है उस पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक से है, ठीक है। आज ये आप लोग करोगे, मैं 3-4 दिन के बाद फिर आप लोगों से पूछूंगा कि क्या क्या आपको पढ़ना है ना। वो सारे टॉपिक्स जो है आपको याद होना चाहिए। ये सब के लिए मैं आप लोग को होमवर्क दे रहा हूँ। ये देखो, एडवांस माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स और मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स, इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक्स से बोल रहे, कौन है यार ये? मनजोत, क्या आपको इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ना है यूपीएससी के सिलेबस में जीएस पेपर में? और मैक्रो भी पढ़ना, माइक्रो भी पढ़ना है? ये बोले कि सर मेंस का बता दिया गलती से, तो क्या मेंस में आपको पढ़ना ही है? अरे, आज मेरे आंखों में आंसू आ गए। अभी मैं आदित्य सर से बात करूंगा, है ना। ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं है, आज आप लोग ये कीजिए, है ना, और चीज़ों को रिवीजन कीजिए आप लोग, ठीक है। आप लोग के लिए टेस्ट भी कंडक्ट किए जाएंगे, संडे को शायद टेस्ट होगा। मैं भी अब आप लोगों को क्लास में पूछूंगा, जो जो टॉपिक्स मैं पढ़ा चुका हूँ ना, आई विल आस्क द क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम ऑल दिस टॉपिक्स दैट आई हैव कंप्लीटेड, है ना। सो मेक श्योर दैट यू रिवाइज दैम वन बाय वन, है ना। आई कैन आस्क यू द क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम एनी एनी ऑफ द चैप्टर्स, एनी ऑफ द टॉपिक्स दैट आई हैव कंप्लीटेड, है ना। तो आज से ही आप लोग पढ़ना स्टार्ट करेंगे। मैं किसी से कभी भी क्वेश्चंस पूछ लूंगा आप लोगों से, ठीक है। हाँ, अब थोड़ा सा मैं स्ट्रिक्ट होऊंगा आप लोगों के साथ, नहीं तो नहीं चलेगा। चलिए ठीक है, कल की क्लास में हम लोग देखेंगे। थैंक यू।